Hi everyone, thank you very much for inviting me to present at this annual meeting for SCORE. I'm here to report about the activities of SCORE Working Group 143 on oceanic methane and nitrous oxide, and I'm making this presentation on behalf of Helen Banger, my co-chair, the participants of the SCORE Working Group, and everybody else who's contributed to the work that we've done in the last few years. A quick background to why SCORE Working Group 143 was created, and it was in response to the need to begin coordination for oceanic methane and nitrous oxide measurements. At that time, many lab groups were conducting oceanic observations of these two trace gases, and yet there was no coordination between the laboratories, and it wasn't known how the different measurements compared against one another. So shown in the bottom plot is the increases of methane and nitrous oxide that are going up every year. And then on the right-hand side are some corresponding global plots of where the measurements have been made across the oceans. Slide 3 shows the terms of reference that each SCORE working group is required to produce and then work towards. And you'll see that many of these have been completed for our working group. We've been around for a number of years now. And so we're really just finishing up the third term of reference as we're looking at standardizing the reporting procedures, the SOPs, the standard operating protocols for methane and nitrous oxide. And because we're one of the more mature working groups, I just wanted to take the opportunity to stop for a minute and reflect about some of the lessons that we've learned during the working group while our working group has been active. And I've highlighted some of these here. These will be, I appreciate these will be common knowledge for many of the SCORE facilitators that work with the working groups. And so I just want to acknowledge that the lessons have been learned by ourselves and try to sort of impart knowledge to people that might be embarking on one of their own working groups. So after 6 years, we've learned that it takes time, especially if we're working with many people across many different countries and time zones. Certainly, the whole lifetime of a SCORE working group is very much appreciated. And many people have become involved in our working group. There's the core working group, and then there are people who are affiliated with it, and then there are some other people who've given advice, expertise, and got involved as well. So of the publications that I've shown on the previous slide, adding up all of the co-authors from each of the publications, we're at about 60 scientists in total. So that's a large number of people to be coordinated and communicated with around the world. I very much appreciated talking to other people who have followed, who've conducted similar activities, in particular the CO2 community and most recently geotraces. These are some large international programs that have achieved some degree of coordination, or in those instances, they've achieved a very high standard of coordination. And so that really helped us thinking about what's most relevant for these methane and nitrous oxide, these non-CO2 gases. And then also, one thing that we've always done throughout this working group is continually revisit what are we trying to achieve and where are our efforts best focused. That's not something that we've really been able to sort of concretely identify from day one and then always return to that. Rather, it's sort of like a revolving circle where it's something that we just continually remind ourselves about, what are we referring to, and what are the priority areas of research. And I think one of the reasons for that is that there's technology developments and there's also scientific advances as well. So when those occur, it sort of encourages us to revisit what we're doing. And then the other is that the SCORE working group will end, where our working group 143 will end shortly. but certainly that doesn't mean the work will terminate, rather it will continue. And I've tried to highlight that on this next slide, which showing that how the lifetime of our working group fits in with all of the activities that are required in order to achieve a coordinated program of trace gases. Certainly, you know, we've still got quite a few activities to go, but we've made a lot of progress during the last 6 years, and we'll continue to focus our efforts on this. So I believe the presentation was one of the main objectives of the presentation is to provide highlights from this year. So there are 2 highlights I'm going to provide. This is the first one. It's the publication of a perspectives article in the EGU Journal Biogeosciences, and it looks at it provides a strategic assessment of methane and nitrous oxide measurements in the marine environment, and there's about 35 authors involved, and it is the end product of a workshop that was held in 2018 in California, where 60+ scientists got together, where we talked about the progress that had been done so far in achieving an integrated program of measurements, and where were we going next. So this should be, this is in revision stage at the moment. Hopefully it will get accepted and then be in print by the end of the year. The other highlight from this year is a best practice guide for making methane and nitrous oxide measurements. This is a major task. That's something that we've been aware that for the last few years, it was apparent that these needed to get written. And then so we identified authors and set timetables and worked towards their creation. These are currently being finalized at the moment, and they will be made available on the Ocean Best Practice website for the global community to comment about before being published onto the Best Practice, Ocean Best Practice portal. That's probably the interesting thing about SOPs and writing SOPs, are in that although they're encouraged, there's no sort of single path to achieve their production and completion. They sort of arrive via, I feel like every SOP has materialized via a different pathway and involves and has involved different people. So this is what we've done. We identified lead authors who drafted each SOP. The SOP was then community reviewed by experts that were invited to become co-authors. Then the draft Word document is formatted into something that looks more like an actual SOP, and that's been facilitated by the Ocean Carbon and Biogeochemistry program. And then it will be posted onto the OCB website, and then we'll advertise their presence, and then they'll go onto the Ocean Best Practice portal. So certainly we very much benefited from the existence of the Ocean Best Practice Network. I actually made a presentation to the for their annual workshop a couple of weeks ago. And this, we would like to have this, again, we would like to have this wrapped up this year. I suspect it might drag on a little bit into 2021, but certainly all of the SOPs have now been drafted at one stage or another and been circulated either amongst the authors or also with the reviewers. Looking beyond 2020, this will extend beyond the lifetime of the working group, but just to provide a quick snapshot of what can be expected. You know, we really need to sort of establish the production of high quality, or we really need to facilitate high quality measurements of nitrous oxide and methane. And there's a number of upcoming oceanographic expeditions which we'll use as a springboard to do that. Those on the left-hand slide is a map of the Pacific Ocean, highlighting in red where transects have been done by NOAA PMEL as part of the Ghost Ship program. And then in green are some oceanic transects planned by GeoTracers, organized by Germany. And in blue is a GeoTracers transect organized by the US. So we have the opportunity for several overlapping transects, and we'll use those to build up a coordinated network, a database of nitrous oxide and methane measurements. Alongside that, and to facilitate that, we'll be producing consensus material. So that's whereby batches of seawater with known concentrations of methane and nitrous oxide will be produced and distributed to participating lab groups. So it remains for me to say thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much to all of the scientists, both officially involved in SCORE working group and people who've become involved over the years as the work has increased and expanded. And not only just sort of, we started off very much looking at the open ocean, and now we've definitely gone more into the sort of coastal ocean as well, and as our work has attracted interest there. Attached to some of the a list here is some of the references that have derived from the working group, and I also want to thank NSF, SCORE, and the OCB program for their support as well. Many thanks.